Welcome to Stu and the Nunn, an online radio show and podcast focused on national security, policy, politics, and selfless service. We're here to give you an honest opinion, a different perspective, and hopefully a few laughs. We do this by not only interviewing guests, but also sharing our own perspectives and asking you, the listener, to interact with us on the show chat room, via our Facebook page, and on Twitter. All right, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Stu and the Nunn. I want to thank you all for joining me here. Let me turn up my mic a little bit. Joining me here on this June 20th. This June 20th. I can't believe almost all the way through June. As you can hear and see through all of our video outlets, I am rolling solo tonight here on Stu and the Nunn, so it's just the Stu show. Toby is out doing his thing, as you guys know, leading up Veterans Outdoors, and the guy's been going back to back. I can tell you, for those that kind of know Toby, maybe not super well, you think, wow, he just goes out and goes hunting and fishing all the time. He kind of sets everything up. Obviously he's in the great outdoors and he's great moments, but he's doing it for well-deserving warriors, men and women that have done a lot for this country and have given up a lot for this country, and he gives them a chance they would probably never ever have. So we're thinking of him tonight. I know he is very much missing not being able to be here. I talked to him just a little bit ago. He was very upset that he was missing tonight's show. I know he'll surely tune in, but when he gets a chance. But Toby's out there making memories for guys and gals that they will never forget, and we thank him and honor him for that. So anyways, thank you for joining me tonight on this June 20th. It's a big week. There's a lot going on, as it always seems to be. As you know, as a regular viewer and listener, it does not take but a day for us to get some news that we have plenty of stuff to talk about. So we'll have plenty of that later on tonight if we get to it. We may not get to it because we have a guest that I am super excited to bring on. He is, if you've read the post and seen the stuff up there and just Google the name Dale Dye, D-Y-E, you will see him and go, I know that dude. I remember him in this or that. And it may be in Range 15, our good buddy Nick's movie. It could be. Maybe not. Maybe it's in a little flick called Band of the Brothers. You may remember him in Platoon with some famous lines in there, and any number of other things. Go to his IMDb page. But we have Mr. Dye on tonight joining us to talk through a number of things, and I would just not going to waste any more time. Dale, are you there?
I am, Troy, and glad to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We are humbled with your presence, and appreciate you taking some time out of your Tuesday evening to talk to us and our listeners.
Glad to do it. It's a great effort. I love these kind of podcasts, and I love the thought of once again talking to a military audience. Those are the people I love, and those are the people I do what little I do in showbiz for.
Yep, and you do a little bit in showbiz. There's no doubt, and we're going to get to that. You've been in a few things, without a doubt. But I think most people know you from that, right? They know you from a movie or a show. I mean, maybe they saw you on Starship Troopers, all-time classic. They've seen you maybe with Steven Seagal, this and that, or like I say, Band of Brothers. But I don't think a lot of people know kind of well before you broke into the movie scene in the mid-'80s that you're not just someone up there playing a role and acting, pretending like someone else, but you have chewed the dirt, you have done the push-ups, and you have done your time and given up a lot for your country. And I want to first say I thank you for your service, because you have definitely deserved it. But I wouldn't mind if you give our listeners a little bit of kind of your background, just kind of a little bit of your history of you besides the person they see on the screen.
Well, I'm glad to do it. I'm like a lot of other guys, I guess I'm a little reluctant to talk about myself, but I was a lifer in the Marine Corps. I did 21 years. I was 13 years an enlisted man, and then got my commission as a warrant officer, and then converted the commission, and finally retired as a captain. While I was an enlisted man, I did most of my combat service. That was in Vietnam in part of 65, and then 67, 68, 69, and 70. Did the Tet Offensive, fought with the 5th Marines in Hue in the dead of 1968. That was an interesting ride. And and then after the war, kind of did what Marines do. I was stationed everywhere. Did a little time in Europe when the Marines picked up the Baltic approaches and got a NATO mission for the first time. So I did some time in Denmark, Germany, and Norway, and then did the Crucible in Washington that everybody has to do for a couple of years, and then off to OCS. I didn't have a college degree at the time, so I only was able to go through OCS in the basic school and become a warrant officer. And then while I was a warrant, I managed to go to school at night, as so many of us do. Got my degree, and then was able to convert my commission. So I never was a second lieutenant. I went directly from warrant officer to first lieutenant. Can I tell a story here?
Absolutely. We are a place of stories. We would love to hear it.
Well, I was a warrant officer stationed out on Okinawa, and I was just about to qualify to get my degree, my college degree, my baccalaureate degree, and I needed some time to study. Some time alone, away from troops and away from job and away from responsibility, and just really crack the books and really study so I could pass all my final exams. Well, in order to do that, I had to go down and ask for the time off, kind of a basket leave deal with my battalion commander. And my battalion commander was one of these salty old dudes who had, fought through the frozen chosen in Korea. And was just this horrible guy. He was this guy. And I appeared in front of his desk, and I stood at attention. And I said, "Sir, I really hate to ask, but I need about 3 days off. I need to be able to just study and so I can meet my exam requirements and get my degree." And he kind of looked at me and cocked an eyebrow, and rubbed at the scar on his face from a shrapnel wound, and he said, "So you're gonna get a degree, are you, Di?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Tell me this." He said, "What's your degree gonna be in?" And I thought, "Oh God, I'm screwed." But I didn't know what else to do but tell him the truth. And I said, "Sir, I have studied for a degree in English literature." And he looked up at me and he said, "Damn, Di, what are you going to do? Read them to death?" And so, there wasn't anything I could say, but aye, sir. And he was fortunate enough to give me the time off, and I was able to study and carry on. But my career was full of stuff like that, and that's why it's such a joy to look back on it.
Yeah, I could picture them saying something like that, right? Because back then it was so much bravado and everything. It's like, it's like,
normally he'd expect me to get a degree in government or law enforcement or public management or something that'd be useful to the Marine Corps. No, I got to study English literature. So right. There you go.
Now, so let me ask you. This is on the fly question. You could tell me if I'm even close. Yeah. Is that somehow related to Joker's role in Platoon?
No, you're thinking of Full Metal Jacket.
I'm sorry, Full Metal Jacket. I'm sorry. Yeah, I can't keep all your movies straight. You're right, and I'm thinking of Full Metal.
No, it's okay. The only real connection I have with Full Metal Jacket was that the guy who wrote the book was a guy by the name of Gustav Hasford, and Hasford was in my unit in the Marine Corps. He was a good friend of mine. And there's arguments among those of us who survived that we're one character or we're another. So some people say it was Animal Mother, and some people say it was Joker, and so on. So I don't know who any of those. I think Gustav made up those characters from little parts of each one of us.
Yeah, I could see that. But when you said that, that was the first thing that came to mind, right? Because just the read them to death, But that's interesting. So you were a Mustang, as we would call it, right? You were enlisted.
Yeah,
and then,
I was.
And then worked your way up, and it obviously you must have found the hidden beauty of Vietnam going back there so many times. Kind of like my dad, you just kept on going back. Huh?
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I wonder. I talk to guys who did 3 or 4 tours in Vietnam, and I don't know. Some of us, I guess, are kind of had trappings of being adrenaline junkies. We would get and guys from Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, you yourself probably know this. I mean, you come home and nothing seems really important. Nothing seems to measure up to that time that you were on the line and out there rocking and rolling. And so what happens is you say, well, look, I need to be where the action is. That's what I enlisted for. That's where what I'm supposed to do. And all I can really tell you is that I would think about it, and I'd say, if I'm a professional, if I'm a guy who's going to do this as a career for a life, then I need to be where the action is, because that's what professionals do. And it's, as dumbass as that can sound sometimes, it's what was going through my mind, I think.
No, I'm telling you, it's almost like listening to myself talk. I've been a long-time military blogger like Toby, and I wrote about that a lot after coming back, about the boredom, about how normal plain life was and how it didn't have the excitement of. So I get it, and even guys I was with, we bitched and complained while we were there. We all wanted to be home to mama. We all wanted to get back.
Yeah.
But as soon as we got back, we were like, if we could all go with each other again, especially it seemed to really be around that, right? If we could go back as a team, we'd go back into the worst part we could, right? To be there together.
Yeah, I mean, that's Troy, and it's one of the common denominators. I've talked to a lot of guys who've done time in various sandboxes and places, with the current unending war and global war on terrorism. I guess it would be called, at least in the ribbon stacks. But that's the common denominator. We all kind of get it. It's what we're there for. It's what we're supposed to do. It's what we enlisted for. And I admire that. I think that's the warrior spirit.
Yeah. And
that warrior spirit, I'm convinced, was the same, at the Meuse-Argonne and the Battle of Verdun, and up through Iwo Jima and D-Day and the Chosin Reservoir in Korea, and in Hue City and Quai San in Vietnam, and with you guys, in Ramadi and the various other places in the sandbox. That's the common denominator, and it's what attracts me to our family, and our family writ large is anybody who raised his hand and volunteered to go and put himself in harm's way or herself in harm's way. So I get it, and that's who I consider my family. That's the reason, in large measure, for what I do. I mean, books I write, the movies I make, the television shows I do, it's all with an agenda in mind, Troy, and that agenda is real simple. I think that our men and women in uniform, and that's from time immemorial to today, have been underserved by the popular media. What our life is really like and who we really are and what we really go through is something civilians will never understand. So if I can shine a little light on it, give audiences a little insight with something I write or something I make or some role that I perform on stage or screen, then I'm contributing to the mission. I'm doing something that's important to us all, and that keeps me motivated, keeps me going.
That is an awesome. It's so timing that you said that. So we were talking before the show, and any of our fans of our show know that next week I'm going to be in D.C. A good friend of the show's been on. He's actually guest hosted. Dave Bellavia is getting the Medal of Honor next week. The 7th, I'm probably last Medal of Honor out of Iraq, the only living one. And last week he did a press briefing, and they got all the gaggle together. His first official press briefing after it was announced by the White House on Monday, and they, someone asked him why, what was going through, all this typical stuff, right? What was going through your mind? What were you thinking about? And
how do you feel?
Right. How do you feel?
How the hell am I supposed to remember that?
Right.
But anyway, go ahead.
Well, he remembered scared. He remembered that for sure. But he one of the things he talked about was the weight of this medal and how because they were like, "What are you going to do now? How's this changed your life?" And he talked about this medal being hung around my neck, and now having this is I have a commitment to keep my guy's legacy alive. And he feels it as a commitment to the Gold Star families of the guys that didn't come back, not just with him but ever. And with the guys that were with him, and he feels the weight of that he has a duty now to represent that medal and represent all them, and that medal now gives him that voice to do that. And I say that to tie it to the same thing.
Go ahead.
You have this voice to you have the screen voice, but you now have a camera on you. You have a way to get that message out there, or at least perpetuate the right image, which I think is pretty.
Yeah,
awesome.
I think so. You please give him my very best when you see him up in D.C. Tell him how proud of him I am. He's a living legacy of guys like me, and I tell you, the Medal of Honor Society is of which he's automatically going to become a member very shortly. Is a wonderful group of guys. They had me down in Dallas last year, and they gave me a thing called the Bob Hope Award for Excellence in Arts and Entertainment, sponsored by the Medal of Honor Society. And I got to meet so many of those guys. I mean, over the years, I've met a bunch of them. And I know what your buddy is going to do now, because they all said that they wear that medal, that prestigious award, the most prestigious America can bestow, for everybody else. They're merely the body around which it hangs. And I was so inspired by that. I mean, I'm a crusty old bastard, but things like that bring tears to my eyes, and I'm so glad that your guy already feels that. He already knows that. That's going to be great.
Yes, yeah, well, it is. But I want to get back. It is. It's amazing how you have taken this, and you've said a few things I want to kind of open up a little bit and talk about. You talked about you're out there to kind of represent. You want to make sure it's represented right. You don't have to, of course, get any specifics. We're not TMZ here, obviously. But I mean, have there been movies or projects you've worked on that you've kind of walked where you stopped, went and saw the director or whatever, them and said, "Look, we got it. This isn't right. This isn't. This is not the way to represent them, or that's not how they would talk, or that." Because you were a military advisor for a long time, I believe, on movies.
Oh yeah.
But even
and listen, I've done that. The neat thing is, and I'll get around to a more direct answer here in a minute, but the neat thing is, nothing succeeds in Hollywood like success. So after Platoon won 4 Academy Awards, and we won all the Emmys with Band of Brothers, and we won a bunch of Academy Awards with Saving Private Ryan, and the directors and producers of those films were kind enough to say that I made a big contribution to the reality of them and the feel of them and the look of them. And so when that gives you a kind of a clout, so somebody has pinned the combat infantry badge on you, and so you don't have to do a lot of arguing. You just raise your eyebrow and say, "No, I don't think so," and you help out. But the key to that, of course, is not just to say no and get yourself into a towering snit. What you do is you come up with something that conveys the same idea, but is what a soldier or sailor and airman marine would really do. If you can bring that and say, "Look, this really, this sucks like a liver vacuum cleaner, and it's disrespectful. But here's the thing that they really would do, and this is a great." Usually, those guys will say, "Yeah, oh yeah, okay, I get it," and off you go. But you have to have the clout. You have to have the bona fides when you do that. So many guys who try to do it, they run up against what I call Hollywood hubris. And that is that, Hollywood thinks that anybody who has to wear a uniform or who volunteered to wear a uniform could have a creative bone in his or her body. So there's no use of listening to them because they don't know drama, they don't know a story. And so that's nonsense. That's horse crap. And so what I try to do is I prove that that's nonsense and horse crap, and I give them a better option. Have I had movies that I've worked on that I'd rather not have worked on? Well, you mentioned one earlier, a thing called Starship Troopers.
Oh, really?
I guess like a lot of us, of course, and I'm sure you had certain books that you carried and that you loved and you kept in your rucksack all the time, and I had a bunch of them. I mean, Dispatches, Catch-22, and Heinlein Starship Troopers. So those were 3 of the books that I always had in my ruck somewhere. And I tried my damnedest to get onto Starship Troopers, directed by Paul Verhoeven. And I did. I got on it, and they let me invent tactics and training for 25th century mobile infantry, just as Heinlein had done. But then I trained the troops for about 2 weeks, men and women together in the field, first time I'd ever done that.
Well,
And then we went into making.
they did take co-ed showers together. I mean, just saying.
Yeah, well, they didn't with me because we were in the field and there weren't any showers, and we just lived and stunk, which is what we do.
That's right.
But what happened was once I brought the troops in, Paul Verhoeven began to do his version of what he thought Heinlein's book was, and it really it was not what Heinlein wrote, and I didn't like it at all. I stuck with it because I had trained those troops, and I wanted them to, to at least have somebody there who was Uncle Captain, and took care of them.
Right.
But I think the movie was just, a kind of Nazi screed, so I wasn't happy with it. And so there's your Hollywood story.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. I mean, as many as you've done, there's got to be some that you didn't have any influence on, or I would imagine sometimes that when you see the final product and you kind of see all the parts, because you shoot a scene and then you may shoot a couple more, and then you're kind of, and then when you see the final product when it's put together, I imagine it looks sometimes different than the way you maybe imagined, even if you read through the script, because right there you're spinning things up.
Yeah, that happens,
Yeah.
You do your damnedest to influence the course of the battle, and you do your damnedest to shape the battlefield. And if you do that right, and if you carry some bona fides into it, usually you can succeed. So fortunately, the neat thing, the short answer is there haven't been many of those. Most of the stuff I've done, I'm pretty proud of.
Well, we always say in the military, right, that the enemy and the weather always get a vote. So I guess in the movie industry,
that's it.
The director always gets a vote.
They do indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. So the director and the studio and the producer all gets votes too. So
they get a big vote. Yeah. Right.
So I do have one question from Toby. He wanted me to ask this on his behalf. So he wanted to know in Platoon when you played Captain Harris, which was I guess one of your first real big. That was really your breakthrough into the scene. Yeah.
It's the one that made my acting career and really set me up to be a successful military advisor in Hollywood.
Yeah. So when you did that, when you called the rounds in on yourself and you dropped the mic and did that, Toby wanted to know, was that in the script or did you ad-lib that? Was that something you just kind of put in yourself and just felt it and went with it?
Toby, you horrible bastard. I figured you'd ask me something like that. I hope you're listening to this. I did ad-lib a bunch of it. What happened was Oliver Stone knew that I had been there as he had in combat. And he said, well, here's the situation. You've got enemy coming in across the wire. They're overrunning. You've got fast movers up in the air. You get on the radio and tell them you made that call. You make that call to expend all their remaining on your position. And he said, now just do it the way you would do it. And I did. I just picked up the radio and in my mind I was back on the battlefield and I came up with that stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean that gave you without a doubt a air of say confidence, but air of credibility, right? I imagine there had to be a number of times in all the things you've been on the big screen or small screen where they just like do it the way you would normally do it. I mean, they don't, like you said, civilians can't understand. They wouldn't know exactly how to write it to make it sound real.
Yeah, and sometimes it just surprises the hell out of them. I mean, their jaws drop. I said, "That's cool. Would you really do that?" And I said, "Yeah, of course. That's what we do."
Right.
But there have been times. On a number of films where I'm acting, for instance. And tell Toby I wish him the best out there, and thanks for asking me that question. But there are times when it gets so real that I have to I sort of inadvertently suspend disbelief. I'm back on a battlefield, and there were times in Platoon when that happened. There were times in Saving Private Ryan when that happened. There were times in Band of Brothers when that happened. There were times in the Pacific when that happened. And I guess I'm glad because one of the really bad parts of being a combat veteran, and you know this as well as anybody else who's seen the elephant and heard the owl, you have a tendency sometimes not to talk about it because nobody's going to understand it. at least among civilians, people who haven't been there. And that's a bad thing. It's really a bad thing, because what happens is it eats at your guts from the inside. And I'm an advocate of being able to talk about it. You know, I talk to any veteran I can about any subject, because I know he wants a kindred spirit, a sounding board, somebody who's been there and can understand the things that he can't verbalize, he can't say to anybody else. So I found that the way I was able to avoid huge bouts of mental fatigue and PTSD, although I'm a little shy about that word or that acronym. The way I was able to handle it is I talked about it. You know, it hurt, and sometimes it was frustrating because people didn't understand what I was trying to say, but I said it anyway because I had to get it out. And if I was to give you or any other recent combat veteran any advice, it would be that. Don't be afraid to talk about it, and never mind whether they understand it or not. But get it the hell out of your guts. Air it out.
Yeah, that's it's funny you say it. So this is something that was kind of an epiphany that a young Afghan vet told me a long time ago. Young sergeant, we were talking at a movie premiere, and he made a reference to, you know, the reason, because I've always wondered this too, is why did it seem like our generation are kind of wussies, right? Why I look back at the World War I, World War II generation, and they came back and built this country. You know, they came back, our grandparents and great grandparents saw a hell of a lot worse in what, you know, there was no 1 year and come back, right? It was, you were over there until it was over with. And, you know, saw some of those horrific things in the South Pacific or in Europe and all that. And especially World War I, which kind of a lot of people don't realize. And they come back and they seem to do okay. And this young E5 said, well, that's because they came back on a boat for 3 months and they got to talk through it. Where we come back in 3 days. I came back from Afghanistan to my living room in 3 days. Where we come back so fast. And even Vietnam, some came back slow, some came back kind of fast. But those guys back then, they sat on a boat and they talked about the time Johnny got shot, or the time Bob was taking a crap and the enemy came up on him, right? They laughed, they joked, they talked through the sad times. And I was like, it was like a light bulb went. I'm like, you're right. I'm like, they counseled each other because they had to. They had nowhere else to go. They came back, they got off the boat, and they went on and had life. Right?
And when, you know, when it got bad, they could whip down to the VFW or the American Legion post and have a beer or two and talk and repeat that experience.
Yeah.
And they did that. I don't know. I raised your generation, so I don't know. I think a lot of that stuff is our fault.
You think a lot stayed too quiet? They stayed too quiet and just put it away? Yeah.
You know, and look at the difference between the way we were treated when we got home. And I don't want to get off into that old cliche, but you know, nobody wanted to talk about the war in Vietnam. It was one of the most unpopular and divisive wars in our national history. And so we had to swallow that stuff. We had to keep it down inside of us. And the one good thing among Vietnam veterans that came out of the whole experience is we were bound and determined that when your young ass came home from Afghanistan or Iraq, there's no way you were going to be treated like that. So we led the cheerleaders.
Yeah.
You know, we were out there waving flags and standing around at the airports with our veterans caps on and everything else. And the vow was that no other generation will ever be treated the way we were treated. Well, okay. But that was coddling you a bit too. And maybe we shouldn't have done that. Maybe it should have been more intimate and less flag waving. But anyway, that's just my opinion.
You're right. You guys were at the front of the line. I mean, and it was almost like an unspoken message was spread. I mean, when I was in Desert Storm, and I came back from 1991 from Desert Storm, my first war, it was the same thing. The outpouring was just so great, and we sensed it then. Like, this is the Vietnam vet. These guys are making sure that this never happens again. And of course, you've seen it.
That was me. You're exactly right, Troy.
Yeah. So I want to kind of go back. You did mention Saving Private Ryan, and I'm bringing that up because a lot of guys I know and gals that have been through combat have experienced some level of it. I mean, when civilians do ask us, or people ask us what's it like, and they try to go through that, what, was this movie realistic, so on and so forth. I think it's a kind of a common thing that a lot of us go, not that we've all stormed beaches by all means, but the amount of violence and noise and adrenaline that the Normandy, the beach landing scenes portray, seem to about to be the closest thing most of us can relate someone who's never seen it to, and say it's kind of like that if you ever get in a real bad battle. You talked about how some of the movies you've been on kind of sometimes was that one of them? Were you there on set when they were kind of putting all that together?
Oh yeah, and we had 1,000 men on the beach, 14 armored vehicles, and 7 ships at sea, and I was trying to control it all on our radio. So I got my Eisenhower fixed that day, but it was extraordinary, and Steven Spielberg and I had talked about it a lot. And, I said, look, this perspective from Captain Miller, Tom Hanks' character, from his perspective, what he would see is asses and elbows. Because that's what you see when you're down and rounds popping past your ears. And the noise is shattering. And you look right at people that are 6 feet away from you, and you see their mouth moving, and they're saying something to you, but you can't hear anything. And so and there are times when you duck underwater, for instance, and all sound ceases, and so we use that. And that was a big thing. I mean, I knew that Steven Spielberg, as brilliant filmmaker as he is, was really bound and determined to give people the closest thing he could, the closest thing a movie maker can do to immerse them in combat, and that was Omaha Beach, and Omaha was a meat grinder, and so we just pulled out all the stops, and with those guys who were on the beach, most of them were Irish, what amounts to their National Guard troops, and we had trained them for 3 or 4 days to get ready to go and use all those old weapons, the M1 carbines and the M1 Garands and the Browning automatic rifles and the M1 Thompsons, and we had loaded them all up on ammo, blank ammo, so that whenever they fired through whatever they were carrying, they could do a combat reload, because we couldn't have anybody out there sticking his hand up and say, "Hey, my gun's out of bullets." So we had to teach them to reload and go.
Right.
And so the blast and fury and all the demolition and explosives we had going on out there, I mean, you blink your eyes twice and you're back in it. It was that kind of experience making it. So I knew at that point what it was going to be when we brought it into theaters with Sense Around and so on and so forth.
Oh yeah. And Band of Brothers. I mean, there's obviously it was a long miniseries, but there were some intense scenes there that were at pretty much the same caliber. Yeah. You
and
kind
that's cool. I really go ahead and ask your question.
No. Go ahead, please.
I really enjoy playing roles where it's a real person. For instance, in Band of Brothers, I played Colonel Robert Sink, who retired as a major general. Bourbon Bob Sink, and I was able to talk to his family, just as some of the other actors talk to airborne legends like Wild Bill Garnier and Babe Heffron and Shifty Powers and so on. And when I talked to General Sink's family, they sent me some recordings of him doing speeches, and I would walk around listening to that so that I could get his North Carolina drawl. He talked like this, and when he spoke in this fashion. So I was able to get that his tonality and his drawl, and I love that. We did a film called Rough Riders with Tom Berenger and a cast of thousands, which was about the Spanish-American War and Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders. And I played Leonard Wood, who was the commander of the Rough Riders until he got promoted, and then Roosevelt took over. And it's wonderful to do the research and to find out who those characters were and what the little physical idiosyncrasies were, and then bring them to life on the screen. You didn't ask that, but I told you. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. No, that's good. I do have some questions from the chat. I have one from one of our longtime listeners. Have you ever had a chance to meet or see his Scott Mann's play "Last Out: Elegy of a Green Beret"? Have you ever heard of that?
I have not. I've heard about it, but I haven't had a chance to see it.
Yeah, it seems like a really powerful piece for sure. Yeah. So you have, like I say, you've been in a lot of stuff. You do seem to get typecast. You are usually the old man. I'm saying, I know you played a sergeant major time. You even played a president, but I mean, you're typically the 05, 06 colonel, maybe a captain. You're captain in Platoon, but you're younger than. You're such a younger self.
Listen, I'm the most typecast guy in Hollywood, and frankly, that's okay. I'm the guy who comes in Act 1 and explains the jeopardy in typical military speak, and then I disappear until Act 3 when I come in and shake everybody's hand and pin a medal on them and tell them they did a wonderful job. Look, that's fine. There are times when the latent actor in me bounces up and says, why don't you ever get to play the homosexual hairdresser, or why don't you get to play this? And I don't know. Sometimes I think I'd like to take a flyer like that, but frankly, I've been so lucky and so fortunate that when I'm able to portray that senior officer correctly, and give him a little heart and give him a little brains and give him a little sense of caring for his men and accomplishing his mission, then that's a great honor to me, and I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. Well, you have played comedies. I mean, you were in Range 15. I guess you could kind of call that a pseudo comedy.
Yeah,
a very
that's right.
crude
I was
comedy.
The president.
Yes, you were. Standing next to great guys like Marcus Luttrell and of course Nick and Tim and all those guys.
Marcus was so much fun at that. When we were doing Range 15, he'd look at me and say, "Oh my God," and I'd say, "Yeah, I know. Let's just do it."
Nice. But all right, well, so you talked about your movies. You've done a lot. Now you've got some stuff coming up on the horizon. There's some stuff people may know about that you're working on, but I know there's some things that are really passionate to you that you got coming up, and I was hoping you could kind of go into that a little bit.
I've directed a bunch of second unit stuff, and it's my time. I'm going to step up and do my first feature film as a director, a film I wrote. And if you had to put a log line on it, Troy, if you had to describe it in a sentence or two, I would say it is the prequel to Saving Private Ryan. Where Saving Private Ryan started with the beach assault on Omaha, we're going to start about 4 hours prior to that, when the 82nd and 101st jumped inland of the beaches to secure the major geographical objectives and the bridges over the water obstacles and so on and so forth, to keep the Germans from reinforcing against beach landings. Had the airborne troops not done that, the Germans could have counterattacked and thrown the whole thing back into the beach. So it's not a stretch to say that that airborne assault saved D-Day. And there was one little fight that I've studied. I studied this way back when I was still in uniform, called Lafayette. And it was accomplished by a cobbled-together group of paratroopers, primarily wrapped around the Able Company of the 1st of the 505th of the 82nd. They captured and held a bridge at Lafayette. The bridge spanned the Murderette River. And it was one of the only ways the Germans could get across that Murderette River and then counterattack down on the beaches. In this case, it would have been Utah Beach. But they stopped them. They stopped them dead. They captured that bridge, held it for 3 days, and stopped the Germans from counterattacking. And the Germans launched tanks at them and just waves and sheets of artillery fire, but they held with their bloody fingernails. They held on. And I've always thought that story of what they did at Lafayette is a perfect example of what happens to individual soldiers when the big plans go swirling down the crapper, and the corporals and the sergeants have got to take over and say, all right, we know what the objective is. We know what the commander's intent was. and we're going to cobble together, and I don't care what outfit you're from, just fall in, and we're going to go do it. And that's what they did at Lafayette, and that's the script I've written, and that's what we're going to do. We're kind of stuck on frustrated right now because the budget's about $40 million, which is chump change in Hollywood, but it's still a lot of money to throw at me as a first-time director. So they're wanting insurance, and I've got to get a couple of A-list actors in the lead roles, and then they'll turn the money loose. Tom Hanks has been kind enough to serve as executive producer of the film. Gary Sinise is going to play General Ridgway, who was the CG of the 82nd at the time. And I'm looking for an actor to play General Gavin and to play First Lieutenant Red Dog Dolan, who was the leader of Naval Company 505th at Lafayette fight. Once I get two A-list actors to do that, they'll cut the money loose, and I'm going to produce a rock and roller.
That sounds awesome, and that just sounds phenomenal. I love the concept of that, and to tell those hidden stories that, there were big battles and great things, but just that were so instrumental that most people never have heard about or know about, and how much an impact they had. So is it just you need the A-list actors for them to feel comfortable to release that kind of money? They think those will pull in? Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, making a movie, frankly, is probably the biggest crapshoot in life because it's so subjective. You never know what people are going to like or what they aren't going to like, and so on. My feeling and the feeling of the producers who are working with me is that, America has just about had it with Marvel superhero movies and transgender, gay, social edge, films, and they would like to see another Saving Private Ryan, a story about American heroes.
Right.
I believe that's true. Lord knows you believe it's true. And I think there's a whole great mass audience somewhere between Los Angeles and New York who would love this kind of movie. So, I can convince them of that, but they still want that insurance. They still want the two A-list actors who they think will automatically draw butts into the seats. So that's where we sit. Where we sit.
No, I think you're right. America does want to see that. I mean, it was a test. Dunkirk and The Darkest Hour are both testaments to that, right? Those are stories about Britain's fight, and phenomenal movies that just told a great piece of history. I still two of my favorites, and those are more recent ones where they were telling true stories from way back when.
Sergeant, as usual, you have put your finger on the problem, and that's correct.
Well, thank you much. Now, let me ask you, we just recently passed the 75th anniversary of D-Day. I was in Normandy for it. Oh, you were? For 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So that was, I saw, of course, we're watching all the footage here, a lot of the flyovers, a lot of our paratroopers rejump, including a very old paratrooper rejumping, and all that. How was... I can't even imagine what it's like just to even be over there and walk among, in the American cemeteries, but to see kind of it almost come back alive. Not come back alive how it was done in a movie with Saving Private Ryan, but they really tried to reenact and bring some of that back. Any reflection on that? Any opinion on it?
Well, look, I've been over there a number of times, but this 75th anniversary was the Super Bowl of commemorations. Everybody was there, heads of European state. Our president was over there, and the living veterans showed up. As many of them, and there's a dwindling handful of them, Troy, left. Right. And I watched them stand on the cliffs overlooking Omaha and Point du Hoc. And I watched them stand outside the outskirts of Saint-Mary-Glace, where some of them landed as paratroopers, and you could see these old gents, some of them with walkers and some of them in wheelchairs, and the fire would come back in their eyes, and you could see their chests swell up, and they would get up out of those wheelchairs and throw the walkers aside and stand at the position of attention like they had so many, 75 years ago.
Right.
And that was so inspiring. What that said to me is, there's our nation. There's America. There are Americans who get it and who will come back and who understand the service and sacrifice that those folks did 75 years ago in Normandy. And man, I'll tell you, if you want something to put, a shot of adrenaline in your heartbeat, and you want something to put some starch in your spine, that kind of thing will do it. So it was enormously motivating.
Yeah, so I watched some of the footage and just seeing it I agree, you see it on their face. I saw them carry the weight of their fellow troopers with them, paratroopers,
Yeah.
grunts, everything. You could see when they stood up, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, they were carrying the weight of all those guys that went through that with them that aren't here anymore. They were standing up for them, and it was clear as crystal. It was very awesome.
You talk to them, and they would say that after a while, they knew that you were a veteran too of a different war,
right?
And they would say to you, I just wish old Chuck would be here. And I said, who was Chuck? And they would explain who he was. He was a guy who got hit at the Bulge or at Bastogne or in Holland someplace, and they were that dead man's spirit was with them.
Yeah.
And man, I tell you, as you and I as soldiers, that just swells your heart with pride.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you saw, I don't know if you got a chance to talk to Canadians, Brits, or any of the others, but what I saw, they were towing the same line. It was nationality didn't matter. Everyone felt the same thing. You go
up to the area behind Sword and Gold and Juno beaches, and the Canadians and the Brits were all there, and they understand. Even the young Canadians and Brits that were there, man, they get it. How much of their history is tied in with D-Day and that landing and the cracking of Fortress Europa. They get. I wish more young Americans did, and that's one of the things I'm trying to do with this movie is show those young Americans that there is a legacy, there is a military history that you have a lot to be proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I give them credit, and I'm a big believer in the red poppy, and I tell people all the time, I'm like, I wish we respected and the way the British, New Zealand, Aussies, Canadians do. When that whole month of November they wear that red poppy. When it's around Memorial, it's all about that. Where in this country, people are like, I have people say, "What are you, Canadian?" when I wear it. I'm like, no, it ain't even about that. I'm like, but it's like I wish they saw that in what it was a symbol of, the way some of those other countries do, who really get it.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if we keep punching at it, we'll bring up a generation who, in spite of themselves, perhaps, get it and who realize it. But it takes efforts like the one you're making, the one Toby's making, the one I'm making. All of us veterans wear that mantle. We have to keep those images and those stories and that memory alive. And sometimes, you got to pull the cell phone out from in front of their nose and stick it in your pocket and say, "Now listen, I'm about to talk to you. It may be a strange and weird experience, but I'm going to talk to you. So pay attention." And we have to do that. That's part of our ongoing mission.
Right. I know we've had you on for a while, so a couple more minutes, hopefully, if you can hang with me.
Okay.
I had a question I want to peel back from earlier. You talked about being on set and all that kind of stuff, but also you've been through it. 3 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star with V. All these you've faced down the gates of hell yourself in Vietnam. Did you ever have the opportunity where a young vet, maybe getting into the movie industry or whatever, saw you and came to you and just opened up? Did you ever get a chance to counsel somebody that, just your paths crossed by working on set or doing something? Maybe they were, working as a grip or behind the camera. Did you ever have that ability?
Troy, I do it all the time.
Awesome.
It's one of the things. I've become a little more famous than I need to be, but what happens is people know about me through the publicity and things like this podcast and various other things. And they'll come up to me and it'll be a grip, a guy who's carrying sandbags around, and he'll say something like Afghanistan last year, 10th Mountain Division, and then he'll walk away. And I say, aha. And the next thing you know, it'll be lunch or some other break, and he'll come up and he'll say, I've been thinking, and then it comes out. And I love that. I give that all the time I possibly can, because that guy, he wants a kindred spirit. He wants somebody to put his arm around him and say, "Listen, man, I don't care if nobody else gets it. I don't care about anything else, but I get it, and you and me are brothers." And that's all it takes sometimes. So yeah, I do that regularly.
Yeah, and I imagine it means a lot to. I mean, I imagine there's kind of social classes on set, right? There's people that are behind the camera,
Oh
in front
yeah,
of the camera, and
you
A-listers
bet.
like you talked about, and to have someone that is your pedigree that's done anything, to walk up to the dude that's carrying sandbags and like, hey, we were brothers before we ever showed up on the set. You know, we well before
Yeah,
we became whatever we are now. That speaks volumes. That is
yeah.
that is awesome. Hey, is there anything else? I want to wind down and give your evening back, even though this has been phenomenal. Is there anything you want to that we haven't covered? You want to just tell our
Well,
audience
look,
about?
I'd love for folks to, the more buzz I can get about this new movie, the better off I am. So if folks want to look up No Better Place to Die, the movie, on the internet, that'd be great. I'm also a novelist. I write books. There's a great series. If you're a Lee Child, Jack Reacher fan, you should read my Shake Davis series. It's all about military and former military, and I think folks would love that. And they can look it up at Warriors Publishing Group, which is my publishing company, and read those books, because that'll, even if you aren't a veteran, it'll give you a look into our culture, into the way we think and the way we feel and the way we act. So that said, I guess that's all of the personal plugs I can put in here, all that you'll tolerate.
You can do as many as you want. Hey, we do have a recommendation out of the chat for your A-listers. We had a recommendation of either Bradley Cooper or Mark Wahlberg.
You know what? I've tried both of them.
All right, man, we just got to work them.
Right now, I'm after Armie Hammer and Brad Pitt.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
So
Brad Pitt
I'm trying,
with he looks good in a flat top. He looks good in a high and top.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, as long as it's not a mohawk. But
Yeah,
at any rate,
and he doesn't throw that accent on her. But hey, well, Dale, thank you so much. I want to stay in contact with you. I'll reach out to you later. I would like to stay in contact with you. Of course, we'd always love to have you back on. But I want to say it was actually a big privilege, and it was great just talking to you, because it's like talking to another vet. I mean, it was just that's why we like to do it. And you, like you said,
I
we
feel
are
the
kindred
same way,
spirit.
Troy.
Yeah.
And feel free to stay in contact with me, and please give Toby my best. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk personally. Maybe we'll do it again when he's home.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do that. But thank you, sir. You have a great night, and we will make sure we'll put the links up to the book and to LaFair Bridge and everything. Right? These are great things you're working on, and they're selfless, because you're not doing it to make the most money you can. You're doing it to tell these stories, which is phenomenal.
That's right. That's right. All right, First Sergeant. Thank you very much.
All
you
right,
may
sir.
carry on.
All right, sir. You have a good night.
Right.
Bye-bye. Bye. All right, everybody, there you go, Mr. Dale Dye. I am humbled. God, how lucky am I? I mean, if you've been listening for the last 56 minutes, 55 minutes, I mean, he's as down to earth as they come. We had a few minutes to talk before the show, kind of got to know each other, and he is, I mean, his IMDb page is longer than my arm. I mean, the guy's done a lot, and he's still doing a lot, writing books, reaching out to vets. You heard it firsthand. He looks for, folks to reach out. He carries the weight just as much as I talked about that Dave is going to carry after next week when he gets that medal hung around his neck. But history, we didn't even get into all of his Vietnam service. I mean, you don't get 3 enemy marksmanship badges for just hanging out back at the mess hall. And you don't go back to Vietnam over and over and over. I'm sure there's no shortage of stories he could talk about there. So we will definitely be having him back on. What a great, definitely check out him. You know what? His IMDb page is so long. You can go flick on probably anything on History A&E, TMC, or any movie channel and catch him on there. But now you got to hear him firsthand and got to know the man, hopefully a little bit like I did. And I'm truly honored for that. But as honored as, like I say, how lucky am I? I get to know great people like Toby and hang out with him and Mr. Dye. And then next week, I get to be with Dave Bellavia. Very excited about that. And with a number of close friends, we will be in down there in D.C. for the ceremony. If you don't know, the White House's feed is already set up. You turn to your major news channel, or probably the White House's YouTube channel or whatever, starting around 3:25 on Tuesday afternoon is when the actual medal ceremony will start. It should run about an hour. And check that out. It's, if you haven't went onto our page, if you haven't clicked the links and read the story. If you have not watched Dave's entire if you haven't watched his entire press briefing from last Tuesday, you are missing out. If you want to get to know who Dave Bellavia is, and you want to know what kind of heart and character he has, you can read all the stuff on the Pentagon website. You can read his book House to House, which is all, if you can even find a copy right now because it's sold out quick. Then watch his press briefing where he talks for almost 30 minutes answering questions from the heart, from his head, no prepared statement, handles it with 110% class. That's, if you're going to watch anything about him to get to know who he is or what he's about, that's the thing to watch, is his press briefing. Like I say, you can just Google it. You should find the whole 30-minute one, not the 2 or 3 minute soundbite, and you will be, I think, very, very impressed. And I don't know who I'm going to run into next week. I am going to be at the White House. I'm going to be at the Pentagon. I'm going to be all over the place over a number of days. And, I am hopefully going to be able to keep my phone with me. And I know I'll have some cameras. So I encourage you to stay tuned to our show, to our website, to our Facebook page. If you don't like it, please like it. Because if anything happens, it's probably going to be on Facebook Live. I mean, what we have here when we do the show, and we're pushing out right now to Twitch and Periscope and Facebook and YouTube. Can't do that from the phone as easy. Just don't have all the hardware in there. And I'm not going to be pushing out to iTunes and Spotify and iHeart that we're doing right now. So I would like our page, pay attention to it, get notifications when we post something, because I'm going to be doing a lot of man on the street kind of interviews. And I don't know who it could be with. It could be with, a staffer. Probably it'll be with Dave for sure. You're going to get a lot of Dave. Probably some of my buddies, Matt Burden, Uncle Jimbo, all those guys have all been guests on here, and if not guest hosted. But it could be someone else that maybe lives somewhere down in D.C. No promises. I don't know, but I'm going to do my best. I'm going to turn on every bit of first art, finagle, and charm that I can to make that happen. And both there. I am going to be running into Colton Smith, our good friend, and I almost didn't announce, proud co-owner of Enlisted 9 Fight Company, our sponsor. I've already talked to Colton. I will be hooking up with him down there, so I know I'll do something with him and bring him on. And so just a lot of exciting things happening all over the D.C. area next week. I am super excited, and I'll tell you, just between me and you, just between us girls, I am numb. I've known about this for months. Still can't believe this is all happening, and I'm not even the guy being honored. Dave is, but just to be part of this and witness this is a absolutely once in a lifetime event and moment, and something I will never forget. So I hope you can stay tuned in and watch over the next few days, and then next Thursday's show. I will be probably just recalling a lot of it. I think Toby will be on with me, and we'll probably just be talking, probably telling some behind the scenes stories, that kind of stuff, whatever I'm allowed to say. And I don't know, maybe I'll have somebody with me in my studio where I'll be, but definitely stay tuned. We are so excited, and this is going to be an awesome event. So with that said, we're just a tad over 1 hour. I don't have much else to cover. There's a lot of stuff going on. Man, Iran is things are going on. Navy SEAL court-martial blew up, went crazy today. We got people. Don't go on vacation to the Dominican Republic, please. Go to Disney, even though they just jack the prices up. At least you'll probably survive if you're going to go on vacation. Things going on everywhere. The politics are hot. World events are hot. And I would, if Mr. Dye hadn't come on, I would have spent an hour talking about all that and still had no shortage of content. But I think I wanted to make it all about that interview and all the great words he said. So this is why we do the show, to bring you guests like that, and we get to meet so many great people because of it. This is why we do it. So join us next week, next Thursday, June 27th, I believe. Yeah, June 27th, 8 o'clock Eastern on Stu and the Nunn. I'll be here. I hope Toby will be with me. I think he will be. And join us then. It's going to be exciting. I'm going to be 24 hours out of a crazy 3 days of life-changing event. So, and I'm just a fly in the wall at all this. I ain't even the one in the room. So, join us next week, Thursday, June 27th, 8 p.m. here at Stu and the Nunn. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell the people you don't like our page, follow us on Twitter. It's going to be a lot of stuff on Twitter. I'll be doing a lot of stuff on Instagram too, actually. I'll probably be doing Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter a lot. So, with all that, thank you all for bringing us into your rooms. Thank you to your houses, to your screens and your ears. and giving up some of your Tuesday night along with Dale to join us and tune into the show. With that, good night. God bless. See y'all later. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Stu and the Nunn Radio. We hope you enjoyed your time with us because we have enjoyed sharing our time with you. Be sure to check out stewandthenunn.com in addition to asking us questions and interacting with us on our Facebook page and Twitter. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern here on Spreaker and Facebook Live. Also, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Warrior Media Solutions, BlueHammer.com, Veteran Outdoors, Graybeard Publishing, and Mighty Oaks Warrior Foundation. Don't forget to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. Thank you again, and have a good night.